What this Compass actually is it's an ecosystem. It's not just a website to go and put stuff. It's not just a licensing mechanism. There are many, many different impressions about what the 3DExperience platform is. Now I'm going to approach this from a standpoint of pretty much you guys in the audience, which is a SolidWorks devotee for my entire career, and things are working, but I want you to really be aware of what's out there. You may continue to use SolidWorks in the way you are for the rest of your career, and that is just fine. SolidWorks will not get rid of desktop installations just because we have cloud applications available. The main reason we have is we have customers just in Michigan still that don't have sufficient enough internet to even download service packs, let alone work live across the web. So it's a pretty big deal to continue to serve the community the way that you want to, but also offer these tools so that if you want to go that direction, you may. If you've been really hankering for it, then we're ready to go. But feel free to use these in the way that works for you today. Okay? So we are not forcing anybody to go anywhere. The thing about this platform, and I'm going to describe it as many ways as possible, is that it is an ecosystem. It is a website that you go to, but it's secured in a much different way. The cloud-based securities are all in place when it comes to tenants, those roles on tenants, and how securities roll out. We're not going to get deep into that. But what it is it's a way to combine work groups, people of different tasks or different types of roles, together to be able to work harmoniously or seamlessly with each other. And it's built on things like different roles which your users can be under, which is different licensing, and then the packages and things that are available to them. And we'll talk about each of those as we go. But what it really is it's an ecosystem of a bunch of different tools. These are apps, and actually above that slide is about 20 more of these that I decided not to put on there because those aren't as important, those are more senior. But each one of these little icons is an app of some sort that's usable on this tool. Pride-wise, we had a problem with this early on because if you notice, right about here, let's see if I can actually do this. Oh, there it is. Right there is SolidWorks, a tiny little app in a big old screen full of buttons. That hit me in the gut because SolidWorks is a huge, awesome tool. It's not just an app. But CATIA's on this list as well, so is Innovia, so are these really incredible software tools because they are just pieces of the pie for the user or the eye beholder. So I want to demystify exactly what the 3DExperience platform is about and how you can actually use this. For those of you who are thinking about what I just did there, I threw a slide in here because I usually have to explain what the Logitech Spotlight remote does, so that's what it looks like. This is just a slide changer, just like any other tool that's out there. But the button on top there, if I hold it down, actually turns it into a spotlight, and I can move it around, or I can double-click it and change it into a magnifier, which is really cool. Or you can double-click it and make it a virtual laser pointer. These days, you walk in places with TVs, they have anti-glare screens, laser pointers bounce right off. So, gotta have a better way to do this. In any event, these types of remotes are really effective for moving around and talking, moving slides, as well as doing some interactive things, because that's actually a mouse as it works. Okay, I want to frame this in a way that makes sense. Not just going to sit here and demo 65 different apps and show you what each of those does, because that's just too much scenery. What I want to show you is exactly how a company would use this tool. Now, I'm doing this in a way that more or less mimics what a lot of your companies are doing today. You just might not be aware of every little step of this. So medium to large size companies, I guarantee that all of the activities I'm about to show you are happening somewhere in that company. It's just about how those actual activities are synchronized or how they are coordinated between people. Now we talk a lot about PDM and workflow assisting in things like that. You check in a file, you do something to it, somebody else is told that the file's sitting there waiting for them, and so on. And there's a lot of that here as well. But it's more about putting together a lot of the ways that we work in disjointed fashions with social media, with email, with CAD, with PDM, with PDM naked environments, and more importantly, you guys just using Windows Explorer for saving files. There's a lot of that brought together with this particular tool. So again, painting a vision for you. We're using a company here called Icon, which is an existing SolidWorks customer. Some of you that are at SolidWorks over the last couple of years have seen this featured a little bit because the people at Icon have produced this really awesome off-road, all-terrain wheelchair, and it's really given people a lot of freedom. And the team itself is not unlike other teams that are out there. So this off-road wheelchair is something that they wanted to develop, and essentially, like any other product, just simply inject your particular product in here. We've got to know what people want, we've got to know what works, we've got to know what doesn't, we've got to validate it along the way, and there's a lot of people touching this data. So that's what the platform really enables us to do. So to get started, we're going to talk about the 4 people that happen to be in this particular situation. Now, Pete is going to be our project manager. He's got a lot of hats. I know you're in roles where you have to do a lot of different things, and then somebody knocks at your door and throws another monkey onto your desk that you have to deal with. So Pete is not only a project manager, but he has to go out and gather research, deals with the customers, so that the salespeople don't have to. Sorry, that's an office space thing. And then he also does design review. So he's got a lot of things to deal with. Now, designers are different people. Okay, we've got similar skills, but everybody overlaps in a different way. This guy named Don, he's a SolidWorks user, CAD user, but he's also got an industrial design background. So somebody who's more into free-form shapes and organic things. He's into that part of the product, and he's got some hobbies. And then Debbie Designer, well, she's similar. She's also a CAD user, but she's more on the mechanical side. So she's doing other things in the company, technical publications. She's got to make marketing. She's got a lot of little roles to deal with. So 2 different designers that use things in completely different ways is the point here. And then Adam, who's the analyst. He has to validate things. He's the guy that signs off and says legally, okay, this is a good product, or no, this isn't a good product. But in every company, there are these types of people that have to work on a product like this. So the way that we get started with something like this is there's a kickoff. Project manager, project leader, he's got to figure something out, or he's got a customer that's now come to him with an idea. There's a lot of ways that these things spawn. So he's going to go out and he's going to get feedback, figure out what we need to do, where to start at the very least, and then we'll hone it in from there. What also happens is he's getting data from other places. He's got to go ahead and then get this data out to his people, make sure that it's all cohesive, and then put it in a location that everybody can access. And then as a project manager, again, the thing that a lot of us don't see is there's a timeline to everything. And there are deadlines that have to be hit, and there's somebody that's responsible for that, even though we're responsible for only our little piece of the pie. So he's going to deal with a lot of the calendar stuff. Now, one of those calendar items gets scheduled. Many companies use things like Microsoft Project. Many companies do something like a Microsoft Project, but they don't use a tool like that. It's very hard-coded spreadsheets or other tools, maybe like a Visio. So trying to put things on a calendar, but not really having any type of feedback loop there. When we get down to the designers, they're going to do their jobs, but again, they're unique people, so they're going to do it in a little bit of a different way and have different responsibilities for this type of product. And then when all is said and done, this guy's got to sign off, Adam. So make sure it's okay, make sure it's not. When situations come up where simulation people get involved, generally changes are going to be found. You have to find where something is too weak, where it's over-designed, whatever, and then there's a feedback loop there as well. So changes have to be assimilated. And that's the basic makeup of what we're talking about with this entire group. Now, all that data, if you're thinking about just the way your network is set up, we still have about 80% of our customers that have 0 PDM whatsoever. That may surprise you, it absolutely might not. It doesn't surprise me. But they're getting the job done using Windows data management. There's a lot of effort in those kind of things. So we want to put the data in a place where everybody can get to it, because CAD users, they can find things on a network. Machinists, maybe not so much. Salespeople, front office, who knows what their computer savviness is. They have other jobs to do. So it's really difficult to keep everybody in the loop in today's technology. So that's what we're going to do with everything that we have here. All right, so we're going to get started with this. When you work at a company that just seems to get things out the door, everybody is somewhat numb to the situation. So again, this is a big overview of what everybody's doing, and it might really bottle things up as to where efficiencies can be found and where detriments to the company actually lie. So this is what we're going to get into with it. All right, so Pete's going to start things off, and this is where we're going to start on the platform. Now again, you think of 3DExperience platform as just a website. There are security measures that make sure that only the right people can see this data. It's a big deal, but we're not getting into the back door, the store of this. What we're going to do is start with what Pete looks like. Now on the Experience platform, what we have is a dashboard. These dashboards are customizable. There's these areas right up here at the top that are tabs that allow you to go ahead and put different dashboards and different widgets together. We'll get into a little bit of that as we go. But essentially what you're looking right now is a dashboard that you can set up to feed the data back to you that you're looking for. And there's a lot of ways to do this. What he has right now is more or less a social media tab. There's comments that are being put out there just like you would on Facebook or LinkedIn or anywhere else. And then there's files that are associated with each of those. So if anybody wants to look up data, and this is anybody, they can go ahead and search for those through a lot of keywords or file names or the W tags that we use for something like this. And then as a result of finding data, they can go ahead and look at it in any way that makes sense. So we have these little 3D view areas, and they're pretty much universal for any type of file. So you find a file, you drag it over into 3D view, and without a CAD system or really any other tools, you're able to bring up this type of data. That's SolidWorks data right there. This is SolidWorks data, but it's out on the platform. So it will be very clear as to where we're crossing over on anything that we are. Inside of the interface, he has a tab called the Design Community. And what that allows you to do is not only look at data, maybe that's where the repository is, but then we can also go to the feedback loops and start dealing with things. Now, for what's happening right now, Pete's going to start polling the data, the community, to figure out what's going on. Now, by putting these different posts out, essentially, again, like social media, you're putting something out on the cloud, and people are then able to go ahead and participate with those. Now, the feedback that we have on this particular one enables us to then figure out what's most important, what people are talking about, what trends are happening. And these trend trackers actually allow us to go ahead and put these things on these different pipeline charts. So you can find out what's most important, what's least important, and again, what's trending and what's not. So you might have 10 bullet points on a piece of paper. This is going to actually tell you which 10 of those points or which of those points is actually most relevant. So there's, again, data cultivation happening in a wide variety of ways off of the platform. So another way that we can go ahead and get feedback from something like this is to actually just go ahead and survey things. So these tools have a lot of areas, like you can go ahead and throw a survey out. SurveyMonkey would be this disjointed tool that we would use in our company for this. The problem is that it's a good tool for creating surveys and getting data back, but what do you do with that data? Well, right here, that data goes right into a performance chart. And at this point, you can see in the upper left-hand corner what, again, is the most important and what is the least important when it comes to what these designs are. Because as people are talking about this, we have other panels. This one here is called a Netvibes Panel. Put in keywords, and it will keyword search the entire internet, and it will simply cultivate and show these on your dashboard like an RSS feed. So if something is important, which in this particular situation is called wheelchair athletics, every article on the web that comes up with a wheelchair athletics reference will show up on his dashboard, teed up for him to pull. All you have to do is put a Netvibes screen up, give it a keyword of any kind, and you'll be fed all the data off the web without you having to go search around for it. It's really impressive, actually. Now, with that, the polling data always comes into this as well. This is live links, so as people start to change and respond, you're going to get these updates up there. So very easy to see, and then data can be pulled out of there if it needs to be pushed into any other system, and raw things like CSV files. So when you see what's most important, that allows you to then go ahead and work with those types of things. Now, he's going to take the data that he found up there, and he's going to publish it to a little area that we call 3D Swim. SWYM, that's the term that we've used inside of Dassault Systems internal. And what it means is see what you mean, SWYM. So the swim community is the ability to put it out there and then have other people participate in that by, again, visually giving out information and then having people interact with that information and feedback as necessary. So he's out there doing a lot of things, getting data, again, where he needs to get it and finding out what direction that they need to go. With that, we have a whole bunch of schedule things that then come to fruition, or at least become obvious. Well, inside of the platform, there are also widgets for things like project planning. So when Pete knows what has to happen, what he's going to do now is go ahead and start kicking this project off. Now, he does this by simply pulling up, in this case, a new project. Now, when you go to the project planning tab, there's a lot of things that you can do with it. You're basically setting up a project folder, you're giving it some details about what the project is, and then you're going to go ahead and tag some participants with this as well. What you're also doing with this is we're adding different things to it. In this particular case, we're going to add some members, so who's actually going to be part of this project. This has adaptive typing, so when you start to type, it'll simply autocorrect and complete. So if I'm looking for Debbie, I just type Deb, and then Debbie, and any other derivative of that pops up. So it's very easy to see the people that are on your platform. Now you get your project tool. And what you do with the project tool is like you would do any other Microsoft project tool. We add things like tasks or milestones, and then we give it whatever that particular milestone's duration happens to be. So with something like this, we're going to have a particular start date. A lot of times when I'm doing these types of things, I like to work backwards, by the way. I know the final date, so I'll start to work from there and then start filling it in up until today. It's a lot easier to back it in that way. For this particular item, what he's doing is adding a task. We've got our people, but now we're going to go ahead and say, this is your task. We got to go ahead and create this. We got to check that. We got to do this. And then you tag somebody to that particular task. Now what's happening is that there's something that fills in the calendar, which is typically what we're boiling it down to when it comes to Microsoft Project. But the important part is that you're tagging a particular person. That person will get a notification that they've got a task that's been assigned. And then when that task gets completed, that feedback loop will then tell Pete here that that has now been completed. And with all these tasks, you can do things like create references to files or embed images. There's a lot of communication that happens directly within each of these line items. So for this particular one here, he's going to go ahead and assign a bunch of different tasks to individual users. So we'll kind of fast forward this a little bit as he goes. What will happen with each of these tasks is a series of dependencies will need to get created. So right now they're just a bunch of individual disjointed line items that happen to be overlapping. But one has to finish before another one starts in many cases, and that's going to be another piece of the information here that's important to know. But in this particular situation, we're doing some design changes. We've got a part that has to be validated, some approval of changes, marketing images get created. Every step of a product going out the back door is being assigned right now, but it's all in the same place, not now the fourth piece of software where we then kick it off to a design software, which would be the fifth. So now when we have these items in place, they can be modified easily. You see, if you want to make dependencies, you just drag from a node at one end of an item to the front of another, and it will have to sequence it in such a way that one will have to be completed before the next one can properly be kicked off. So there's a lot of interesting intelligence that happens as a result of just how this sequencing takes place. Now, reordering those tasks, making them in a different position, all that takes place as well. This is more for visual in this case, but all of the little tracers are going to indicate what the dependencies on these tasks are, much like you see in the SolidWorks Feature Manager when we have part or feature parent-child relationships. So once this is done, everybody's going to start to get these pings. They're going to get their tasks popping up on their screen. So if we move over to the rest of the people in the assignment here, we can start to see what's going to kick off. So we're going to jump down to Adam for a second. He's the analyst guy. He's got to say okay to everything. Well, what he's going to do is go ahead and look at some things. He doesn't have CAD access, but he does have access to Inovia, and he does have access to Simulia, which is world-class simulation inside the platform as well. What happens with Adam is he's going to go ahead and start a task. Now, the task that he has assigned in this particular case, he can go ahead and attach other people to, but when he puts that task in process, that's going to start to, again, ping other people that this task now has gone from planning stage to something that's actually being used. So again, the status of everything is being tracked, and when it's done, again, an indication of whether that task is completed or not will be put in the system as well. So he's got a task here where he needs to make sure that everything is efficient. It's light enough, it's not over-designed, and that's something that he's going to go ahead and actually look for as the design flushes out. But he tagged Don in that task so that when Don's done designing, he'll be notified that he now has to check the design. So when we switch over to actual Don going to do some designs here, he's got to make some changes to a file. And what Adam asked him to do is lighten up the suspension. So again, these designs were done in SolidWorks, but I'm only saying that. You wouldn't have known exactly where the design took place because there's actually going to be a lot of overlapping in tools, but a seamless integration between them. So I'm only letting you know that just because I want you to know what's happening behind the scenes. What Don is doing right now is taking a look at the files, and he's got view capabilities, and that's great. But when this notification comes through that he has to do something from Adam Analyst, so up there in the top, you're going to see those things pinging in. Just by clicking the notification, it jumps over to the task that Adam created, and we start the social media stream once again. So there's a response to this. But again, cohesively, it's all in one spot. It's not stuck in your email. It's not out on one of 17 different social media sites. So once he responds to this, he's now going to go ahead and start doing his job. And by responding to it, or at least starting the process, he can drag it over to in process, and then that's going to let Adam know that he's now working on it. So it takes a lot of these little, what ifs or wondering if things are happening, and it essentially tells everybody what's happening at any time. So we're on the platform right now, but work has to be done in SolidWorks. And over here on the left-hand side, this is the area that we have the compass. And I kind of went past this, but when you click on the compass, each one of these 4 quadrants actually fires up different apps. When you click on the 3D apps, what you get down here in the bottom are going to be things like XDesign and Freeform and the SolidWorks connector. So the apps are going to be specific to what's happening. When we go ahead and fire this up, it actually launches SolidWorks on your desktop, not in the browser, and it brings up the PLM connector tab, which is Inovia. That's data management, but it's data management in the cloud. This is something SolidWorks has not had access to this point. We've installed data management on a server in your building, we've connected you to an SQL database, and you've run it there as an isolated system. This is now PDM in the cloud where we can just upload data and make changes, and then anybody else that has access to it is just going to get that data wherever they happen to be. This is the next paradigm, and it's going to be the IT naked companies that don't have resources for PDM that are going to absolutely latch onto this Inovia tool. So what you're doing now in SolidWorks is you're seeing the same searching and the same data that we just saw up on the platform within the website. It is data management to the hilt. In fact, Inovia is far and above what PDM Pro and PDM Standard do. You're going to have the ability to search same ways that you would inside of the platform using the W tags or using any type of keyword, but essentially you get the data management feedback. Status of a file, current revision, who's got ownership of it, what its state happens to be. But again, we're on SolidWorks Desktop running from data off of the platform. So all he's going to do on this one is just simply go ahead and grab the front suspension file that's currently the file of question. Now with this particular file, all the metadata is going to be right there, but a simple click and drag is going to enable him to go ahead and open up this file directly within SolidWorks. So this file has progressed to a point where it's got a particular revision, and now we need to go ahead and make a change to that. So that's what he's going to go ahead and do. He's going to take the relations of this file that's in process, and we'll just go ahead and open this in SolidWorks. So it's pretty fluid. The not having the IT resource to me is a big deal because we've got some competitors out there that the CAD system isn't so great. They are still storing files in the cloud. And as far as that's concerned, the kids coming up these days that have Google Drive and that type of efficiency, they're looking for files stored on the web. They don't care about having things local. So with this particular file, we're going to take ownership of it, just like we would with any other read-write application when it comes to data management, and then we're just going to go ahead and open up this file inside of SolidWorks. So now we're sitting at a point where we've opened the file in SolidWorks. Again, standard desktop. Pick your poison. What are you efficient with? And in this case, working in SolidWorks is what everybody wants to do. We're just trying to make a cohesive access to the data and the process. So now he's sitting in SolidWorks. He's got the capability to go ahead and do any other SolidWorks operation, but to do it, he's got to take ownership of the file, just like you would in any other file controlled scenario. So by taking ownership of the file, he can make the necessary changes to take this data and make it what it needs to be, which is a bit lighter. So in this case, we are reserving it, which is a checkout term that you might use in a SolidWorks PDM application. But by having ownership of the data, he can make the changes that are necessary, and then of course, with any change in a PDM system, it's going to indicate that those files are different, and then we just go ahead and upload those back to the system as a new version. So it's pretty fluid in that respect. Now with this change, here's what goes on. He's got new data here. And over on the right-hand side, if you notice this, what you're actually seeing here are the different check marks that indicate what files have actually been changed. So like any other PDM situation, files that haven't been changed don't need to transmit. Only the files that have changed need to be checked in and bumped in a revision. Now, that being said, anybody else or any other data that's actually using these files are now going to get a notification that new versions of this data exist. And would they like to use it in their assemblies or not? Watching PDM check marks and ownership things change isn't that exciting, but in this particular case, we're just going to go ahead and check in those few files that have changed, and then that will be all we need to do on this side. Everybody else in the loop will be told about it, and then everybody else will have access to both the old and the new revision based on permissions. A really simplistic process. There's some B1s there intermixed with the A1s, so the B1s, of course, are the revisions that have been bumped. Revision scheming is completely in the eye of the beholder, by the way. So once these files have now been bumped, and we're clicking through just showing you the files that have changed, what we're now going to do is go ahead and trigger a little bit of a life cycle activity. So for this situation, we're going to change the maturity state to something that is editable, called in work, to something that is not, called frozen. It's kind of read-write access, but everybody does different terminology when it comes to this. The whole point of what we're talking about, though, is that the changes have been made in SolidWorks, and now everybody else is going to get access to these changes. We just have a better way of throwing the data over the wall. All right inside the 3DExperience platform, what we're now doing is moving over to this thing called a collaborative task. And again, there's a lot of different tasks that are within the tool. But in this particular case, what the collaborative task is going to allow us to do is go back to the progress and then change this task to something that's finished. So now whoever needs to know that I've taken the file, I've made the changes to it, and I've checked them in, slide that thing over, and everybody is in the loop, completely aware of it, and they have access to the data directly. So that can happen on the cloud or can happen directly within your task pane tab directly inside of SolidWorks. There's no need to leave there for the people that love SolidWorks and don't want to go to the web. Now where we start to cross over is where everybody else has to deal with this. So the data is in a centralized location, and the fact that the data changed means everybody's accessible to it. So Don's going to make these changes, but Pete and Debbie and now the analysts are going to be told about each of these changes. Now within the platform, you can validate what's going on here. So again, dragging files around to these different viewer tabs enables you to very easily see what's happening, and the files never need to be opened in a CAD system whatsoever for that respect. What we're doing on this one, though, is we're going to go ahead and annotate this. What Don wants to do is let Pete know what's happening, but Pete's not that great of a CAD user, so we're going to tee him up with some annotations. So opening up the image and marking up directly on it, you see how it's actually snapping those to nicer looking graphics? We can take this, take a little screenshot of it, and then that's going to give us a grab that'll allow us to simply attach an image to a social media thread. So with this image captured, what I can now do is take that image, kick it off to Don and say, hey, this is what's going on, take a look, what are your thoughts? Publish. And this thread, along with the rest of them, go to the same dashboard that everybody else is available to see, so they can all see what the progress of this happens to be. It really is the conglomeration of a lot of things that we all do today, just happens to be placed in a singular location. So it's about really people accepting it more than resisting it. Now, where things start to change from this area is we now got to throw it over the wall, and there's other people in line here. So Debbie's got to do her job. And one of the things that Debbie does, as I mentioned, is she's a CAD designer, but she also has to make a bunch of technical publications. So she needs to come into this file and she needs to use it in things like SOLIDWORKS Visualize, SOLIDWORKS Composer, whatever else she needs to get done. So again, she's sitting inside of the file inside of SOLIDWORKS, and she notices that those files have now changed revision. It's really, really subtle on this one. There's actually a little plus symbol right there where that cursor is. That indicates to her during her live session that that file's been bumped. Now there's other notifications that'll pop up, but that's the easiest one to do. If you right click on that one, on demand, you can replace the revision. We don't want files just updating out from under people because that's really disconcerting. We want it to be an on demand but very easy thing to do. So all she has to do is update that document with revision, and you'll see all that little blue data there just simply update to the latest release. And that's not magic, that's just what PDM does. But in this event, it's just easier to do it because she could be anywhere in the world, not just in the same building. It's very, very simple when it's Innovia and it's not necessarily PDM local installation. Okay, so now this has been changed, and she's going to save the top level of the assembly as a new version as well. That way we can go back to it if necessary. If files within the assembly have changed, then the assembly has changed. That's just how data management and document change goes. Okay, so kind of wrapping up what she's taking care of. She's going to make a bunch of data. Of course, with SOLIDWORKS data, you can go off in different directions and either make visual graphics right here inside of SOLIDWORKS or go ahead and kick these out to SOLIDWORKS Visualize. The beautiful part about using Visualize is it's a separate window. It doesn't consume a SOLIDWORKS license, so somebody else in your company can be doing these graphics while the SOLIDWORKS user is still working. And if a SOLIDWORKS change happens to the geometry will update in Visualize. So it's really a great environment for creating these kind of things. We'll come back to that. I'm not going to demonstrate how she's doing those things. Okay, so back to what she's creating is all of this information, data, images, videos, whatever it happens to be. So what she's going to do with those is throw those up on the platform as well. Basically what's happening here is these social media locations and file repositories are just that. They're file repositories. They're just like your local work group or your local working folders. What she does up here, though, for organizational sake, is she's going to create something called a bookmark. Now, that's just another term for essentially a favorites folder. But what it gives you is a location to put things where other people can then have links or notifications on what's happening there. So while she makes a nice bookmark folder here, she's able to dump in any type of file that she wants, which in this case will be images, could be some videos, there's other things. But right out of Windows Explorer, it's just being dragged and dropped into place. So that'll upload quickly, and then everybody else will now have access to those. So there's some JPEGs, there's a couple of a Word document, and there's some other things. And just by dragging those over, I think this is a JPEG first, PDF file will be coming out. It just shows in the viewer just like the 3D CAD files did. It's the same viewing window, it's just a matter of what document you want to pull up and dynamically view. So really simple there as well. This particular file, we're going to go ahead and publish to the SWIM site as well. And that takes a snapshot of what they're looking at, and it'll throw it out into the community so that we can garner some feedback with something like this. So communication is the biggest part of this. I think everybody's kind of getting a view of the theme that's there. Now with this done, Debbie's done what she needs to do. She's going to go ahead and drag and drop what she's done over to the progress bar. And all of this isn't just a graphical thing. Everything that's happening right now is feeding back into that original project chart as well. So the leader of the project, which is Pete, is getting feedback from every little thing that's taking place underneath those. What she's doing on this one is not only completing the project, but also attaching links to the folder full of all the data that she produced as part of the step she was asked to do. So again, a lot of crossover, not just that it's done, but that it's done and here's all the data on a silver platter for the next person to see. So this is something where when you see it and play with it a little bit more, you'll get a better feel for exactly what it can do. But just know that it is about unifying a lot of people that are out there. Okay, last part of this. Debbie is done with what she did, and I've got to go ahead and hit Pete for a second, but there's something else that's going to take place here, and we're going to do less than just moving around on the website. What Pete is getting is some feedback, and from these notifications that are coming across that everything is done, okay, that's really good feedback. But eventually we're going to get to the point here where we have to do something that isn't done yet. Now what is done is clearly indicated in gray. So every time somebody says done on the progress, these things are changing color codes. Therefore the project manager's desktop and his dashboard is just updating. The blue stuff is the stuff that has yet to be done. So we still need to deal with those. Out in the design community, one of the things that's being mentioned out here is that there's a lot of concern over comfort. It's just one of those things that you can see if you're spending the time polling customers and users, especially the ones that are using the prototypes. So as we go ahead and take a look at the files that are out there, Pete, being a non-CAD user, is still able to open up this data and again see what's going on with this particular design. So as he's taking a look at it, rotating, panning, zooming, that's all basic stuff. But no CAD system needs to be loaded up onto Pete's machine. What we have right now is some simulation results that came from Adam. Bringing the simulation data over to the viewer just as we did the CAD data, the basic PDF files, and all the images. So it's really universal in that respect. But rotating this around to see the images of what that looks like, again, gives further indication as to what might need to happen on the project or if we've hit the marks for what we're looking for. So Pete has access to the sim data from Adam, Pete has access to the viz stuff and all these images that we're getting from Debbie. Basically everybody is throwing their jobs into the one bucket and everybody is aware of what has been done. So pretty simplistic in that respect. Okay, so now we're done really publishing this information to the community, but we start to get that additional feedback that comes in. So right now what Pete's going to find out is that a little bit more needs to be done. And from the feedback of the community, we've got to kick Don into gear with his industrial design process to start to make the seat cushion for this, because it isn't quite as comfortable as it needs to be. We're going to take this now, and I'm going to go a little less of just what the platform is about, and we're actually going to focus a little bit more on a particular product for once. Now this product has had 3 different names over the course of the last 3 years. It was once upon a time called X Design, then it was called X Shape. Now it's called Freeform. Actually, now it's called Sculptor. This is the 4th one. We're on 4 names now. But either way, this is Sub-D modeling, okay? And subdivision modeling is incredibly different as opposed to things like feature-based modeling like SolidWorks. So we're going to create a part that's a foam organic shape that sits in the middle of this. And I want to show you how Freeform or Sculptor, now as it's called, actually works. When you're doing sub-D modeling, it's a lot more about primitives. There's a lot of drag and drop, there's a lot of selections, and a lot of selection filters. So you start with a piece of geometry. Now many times we'd start with just a primitive like this, a little rectangular type of box. And when you're looking at these, you're going to see the subdivisions, the number of rows and facets that happen to be there. And it's a lot of drag and drop, as you can see here. Based on the position of the triad, which is in the center of the part, any pushes and pulls on the triad are usually symmetrical around that. But you can use the triad itself to do other things. You can reposition the body that happens to be there. If you reposition where this triad happens to be, then the symmetry around the push and pulls changes. So if we left justify it and then we start pulling on the axis, it's going to grow, but it's going to grow equal and opposite in that respect. So left the left side there, the right side grew. If it happened to be in the middle, it would grow in both directions. There's a lot of things that happen based on what you select in sub-D modeling. You can pick nodes or edges, nodes or vertices, depending on what you want to call those, edges, faces, combinations of all of these things, and based on what you pick will determine the types of changes and things that happen. Now we deleted that edge, which was the edge all the way around. By window selecting all these nodes, we're going to put them all on the same horizontal plane. We're going to align them horizontally with each other. So watch what happens here. They all kind of go down towards a hole, and you'll see how this plane goes. And then we start moving this controller up there in order to change the shape of that bottom face. You get a better feel here in just a couple of seconds for what's going on. Whenever symmetry is involved, just like a mirrored feature in SolidWorks, we can turn that on here. But the thing is it's a live symmetry. So you determine where the symmetrical plane is going to be, and then everything you do on one side of that happens to the symmetrical nodes around the other side of this. So as we put in the symmetry plane, which you can kind of see there in green, we're going to go ahead and now start changing the mesh on one side of it, which is then going to go ahead and modify the mesh on the opposite side. So we can add additional lines in there, we can add additional nodes as a result, and then as we start to go ahead and grab things and change those, you'll see how they do affect both sides of this. So here we're picking on nodes or points, and by moving those around, it essentially moves the edges that are also attached to those nodes. But the selection filter to me is the key to the city in this tool. I don't use it as much in SolidWorks because I look at the feedback and the inferencing that you see with the color feedback, but here in Freeform, We have to have this thing set up where you're picking only nodes or only faces or only edges, because window selecting is predominantly the best way to get it in bulk. So if I go ahead and say pick faces instead here, what we'll get is the ability to window select, but it's not going to pick the nodes, it's going to pick the face. And if you move the face, then everything has to shape around it, because that's how sub-D modeling works. If we go back in this case and say all entities, and then we start to pick individual features. So we're going to come into this one here, do a little bit of edge and a little bit of point all at the same time. So by picking the points, we can make them all horizontal axis with each other and then start to twist. Or by picking individual edges or points, we can go ahead and modify those by using the triad, which is something we've been indoctrinating you in SolidWorks for 20 years now. The triad positioning, we have a freeform feature in SolidWorks, so as you tilt the triad in different positions, that'll lock its axis and allow you to then control the movement and the positioning of these features. But it is very much clay sculpting that you're feeling like. So if you've never done an application like this could be incredibly liberating. It also could feel very, very clunky to you. So again, past life stuff. But you see the fine tuning that's happening there. Any of you that are very precision based, your head is exploding while you're doing this, by the way. Because I want to know the number that I just dragged at. But it's not about that in these situations. So, organic shapes, things like helmets and pads and mice and just all kinds of swoopy products are just kid stuff in a tool like this. Now, what's awesome here is that it does handshake with SolidWorks. If this is the best tool for creating sub-D models and you need to throw them over the fence to SolidWorks, it is a single button pick away. So bake the geometry here and then throw it over the wall. What we're doing on this one to finish it up is we're going to go ahead and insert a few different loops to this. So there's a lot of ways that you can refine and add things. Where you click will add loops. It gives you refinement in those particular areas. But it's all about exactly what you're trying to deal with. There was another video I was going to show you here where you can not just make these swoopy but also crease them. It gives it a nice 90-degree edge to it. It's different mentality, but in the end, you're just creating these 3D shapes through slightly different methods. So it's a neat tool, though. I don't think we've got much more on the end of this video. I got about an hour video just showing the complete scrutiny of how this particular product is made. All those points are going to be flattened on the same plane as a result of that pick, and that's pretty much what we need to do on this. So you can use the cage, much like we use a style spline. That's that outside border that he's using right now to go ahead and move these points, or you can actually pick directly on the geometry. So we've been borrowing some different approaches from the Dassault team as we go in SolidWorks, but it's more to unify the workflow to something everybody is more used to. So very, very interesting results here, though. Now, once this file is done, it really is literally a matter of throwing it over the wall to the SolidWorks users. So it's organic geometry, but it is analytic in every respect. So it's usable for 3D printing and, of course, usable inside of SolidWorks from this point. So what we've got on this file here is the ability to build it, of course, make a snapshot and deal with the community, because it's a lot about indicating what's going on and letting other people know what's happening at this point. And in this case, having that thread out there that's not just stuck disjointedly in email is one of the other parts that they're really pushing on something like this. Okay, this is going to go up now and everybody gets notified as a result of this. The most important part, of course, is that it can be used in SolidWorks so the other designers can pull that into play, and then the project manager, Pete, he was going to be aware of everything that happens as well. Looking pretty good on time. So this is kind of the wrap up to everything that's happening. Once the data's done, Pete's the guy that's actually finalizing the project, so he can see everything that we've got out on screen. Now, what's important again is that he's seeing the mechanical design that was done by Debbie out here, but he's also getting an indication that everything that came in from Adam is done, and now Don has gone ahead and taken care of the actual changes to the seat itself. So again, not looking around for who's doing what and when or how things are from a status. It's all just right there in front of you. All right, and then last thing here for the CAD Naked Project Manager. Again, viewing tools are everywhere, so we can go ahead and access that data anywhere that's necessary. So there's a lot of images out there. There's the new changes that have been made now to the seat. And it's just a drag and drop to that same viewing section, and you can see exactly what was done inside of the Sculptor tool. Pretty crazy. All right. So now that that's all approved, we'll kind of just fast forward into those little spots. But we're putting it back out there, closing out the project, and then when the maturity level is closed and released, essentially that ices everything. Visibility is king. Really can't say much more about that. But from a standpoint of your internal organization, if you don't have the ability to have IT that are keeping servers up and keeping different softwares working, this is the kind of tool that may work for you, because it is just a service, and that service is guaranteed, and there's somebody out there doing the updates. It's just a matter of having licenses and doing your job. So they're really looking towards a different direction for those who need it. But that direction doesn't eliminate SolidWorks. It just puts a different way of communication inside of this tool. But all these different tools will speak to each other as a result of this. So the final process is really just 4 people being able to deal with the situation of the day in order to go ahead and do their proper jobs and create this product. But everybody having slightly different responsibilities, all leading to the final product. So I'm going to leave it out there for a little bit of question once again. The apps are interesting, they're vast, and they're more than just creation. There's data cultivation, there's a lot of visibility, and again, these viewer tools that are out there, and it's just getting bigger based on what people are asking for. But these are the things that are all contained in that particular presentation that are typical day-to-day jobs in most companies. They're just all in one place now, instead of this set of things where we're in Office, we're in SolidWorks, we're out on the web, we're hitting email, we're doing a lot of different things that just need to be brought together. And I think that's where we're going to leave that one.